What is your favorite story from mythology, Egyptian, Greek, Norwegian etc.? A bit later, Thrym is a bit drunk now, and he decides he wants to lift his new bride's veil and steal a kiss before they are formally married. To his horror, the first thing he sees as he lifts the veil are Thor's angry, super intense, bloodshot eyes, death glaring back at him. He freaks out, but Loki says, "Your Highness, do not be alarmed." She only looks that way because she was just so excited about the marriage that she didn't sleep in 8 days. Normally she is very beautiful. Thrym accepts this explanation, and the feast continues. At the end of the feast, they are finally to be married. As part of the ceremony, they bring out Thor's hammer Mjolnir as a ceremonial item to sanctifying the marriage. As soon as Thor is within reach, he smiles, throws off his dress, grabs the hammer, and bashes Thrym's face in. He and Loki kill a few more giants for good measure, give everyone the finger, and then hightail it the fuck back to Asgard. The end. More folklore than mythology, but the story of the cheetah's tear marks. A cheetah mother had to leave her 3 cubs alone every time she went out to hunt. A particularly lazy human hunter saw this, and decided to steal her 3 cubs and raise them to be his own personal hunters. When the mother returned from her hunt, and saw they were missing, she cried loudly enough for the village elder to hear her. The man figured out what had happened, had the lazy hunter exiled, and returned the cubs to their mother. But by then, she'd been shedding tears for so long, the tear stains turned black. Every cheetah cub born from then had them, too, reminding the human hunters to rely on their own skills, rather than find the easy workaround. Aztec myth of the creation of the sun, where the humble god was honored above the prideful god. From Wikipedia, the most handsome and strongest of the gods, Tecutitlicatl, was supposed to sacrifice himself, but when it came time to self-immolate, he could not jump into the fire. Instead, Nanadhuatl, the smallest and humblest of the gods, who was also covered in boils, sacrificed himself first and jumped into the flames. The sun was set into motion with his sacrifice and time began. Humiliated by Nanadhuatl's sacrifice, Tecutitlicatl leapt into the fire and became the moon. 3. Maui and the sun. Maori mythology. Every day, the sun races across the sky as fast as he can. This makes the people very sad, because they don't have enough time to do the things they need to do, like farming, fishing, gathering water, etc. Maui and his brothers decide to do something about it. While the Tamanuati Ra, the sun, is sleeping beyond the horizon, Maui and his brothers get busy. They weave a great net, bigger than any net has been woven before, and then they wait. Come morning, the sun shoots up into the sky, to race across the sky once again. Maui and his brothers throw the net, and catch the sun in it. They drag the sun to the ground, pull out their patu, a kind of club, and proceed to beat the shit out of the sun. All day, Maui commands the sun, "From now on, you will go slowly across the sky, so that my people have time to farm, to fish, to gather water, to weave their nets, and to do whatever else they need to do." Tamanuati Ra replied, "Ow, fuck, okay, fine, I'll go slow, just stop beating me." And ever since then, the sun has gone slowly across the sky. Edited, I accidentally a word. 2 cool details to add. He used the jawbone of his grandmother Muri as his weapon. In another event he got fire from another grandmother Muika, who gave it to him by ripping her fingernails out, which were made of fire. In some versions the ropes they wove weren't strong enough and started to burn up, and they were saved by a rope that his sister wove some of her hair in. I only opened this AskReddit to see if there was anything about Maui, and it's the second one. It's even the story I was thinking of. The only detail I would add is that Maui didn't use a patu, he used his ancestor's jawbone, and cracked the sun on the nose a couple times. I even read "ow, fuck, okay, fine" in such a Maori accent. It's been too long since I got into Maori mythology. If you, anyone else has some others, drop them below for a read. The story of Hades and Persephone from Greek. Pretty much the story. Hades found a beautiful woman named Persephone, bringer of death, Orca, and brought her to the underworld. Demeter, Persephone's mom, tried to find Persephone and decided to put the world into a famine. In order to keep mortals alive, Zeus sent Hermes down to the underworld to retrieve Persephone. Hades gave her a pomegranate to eat, binding her to the underworld, but for only half the year. So, for 6 months, she spends her time on Earth, making plants grow and creating spring and summer. When she is in the underworld, the Earth is left to the cold, bringing in fall and winter. She truly does love Hades, and wishes to be with him. Her mother, Demeter, is a bit controlling and sort of sheltered her for the beginning of her life before she met Hades as well. I know there are several different kinds of stories between Persephone and Hades, but I like this one the most. Sisyphus. How he cheated death by tricking Thanatos into showing him how his shackles worked only for Sisyphus to chain the god of death himself. Sisyphus then gets taken to the underworld by Ares because war left no casualties, so he ends up in the underworld only to plead to Persephone to be let back into the world of the living because his wife hadn't properly buried him and he wished to at least make sure that happened. He goes to the land of the living only 2 years later pass away. Hades and Persephone are furious that he betrayed their trust and punished him by forcing him to roll a giant boulder up a mountain only for it to constantly roll to the bottom when it gets near the top, aka, cheated death will eventually yield no fruit. Norse myth otters ransom. Odin, Loki and Hona travel together and come across an otter eating a salmon. Loki throws a stone killing it, and they are all pleased to have a good feast for the evening. They come across a farmer and his sons and are allowed to stay with them for the night, offering their food for dinner. The farmer recognizes the otter as his son who takes the form of an otter during the day to fish, and he and his other sons jump them. The gods offer to pay a ransom, and Loki is free to go to bring enough red gold to fill the skin of the otter, which the farmer skinned, and also cover it completely. Loki borrows a net from the sea goddess and goes to a cavern and catches a huge pike, which changes shape to become the dwarf, Andvari. Loki forces him to give him all of his red gold, and finally forces him to hand over his ring. Andvari curses Loki for taking his gold by force. Loki returns to the farmer and gives Odin the ring, and allows the farmer to stuff the otter skin full with gold, and then cover him. They claim that their whole body is covered, but the farmer finds a whisker which is not covered, so Loki tells Odin to add the ring. Loki then tells the farmer about the curse, that whoever takes the gold and the ring will be ruined by it, passing the curse along to the farmer from himself in the process. I really just love how classic Greek mythology is so different from a Christian. The idea of religion and cosmology. Almost all of the gods have huge psychological issues and interpersonal problems, compulsive philandering, being too controlling, impulsive, overly emotional, etc. Oddly, by far the one who comes out the best is Athena, rather than, say, Zeus, but even she comes off as emotionally limited and doesn't seem to have much of a sex life or a personal life compared to the others. The Greeks' concept of death is to go to a place that's pretty dull and not much to look forward to, and not very linked to punishment or reward, with the very narrow exception of the Elysian fields. By far the one who comes out the best is Athena. Dionysus comes off pretty well honestly. Mostly just travels between Greece and India, throws parties with a caravan of rad-hot hippie girls, fights for the right to party in Thebes. Also his cult seemed like one of the better ones of ancient Greece, since it was classless and not gender segregated in a heavily class, gender stratified Greek society. I 100% agree, and I think the reason I love them so much is because they were written, told to be as emotionally volatile as humans and experience the same feelings. That, along with having godlike powers, makes for some incredible stories. But also everything else about the mythology is just cool. The ancient Greeks really knew how to dictate a great story. Lol. The Trojan War. A group 3 goddesses get in a fight over who is most beautiful, name a human judge for a beauty contest, bribe him with wild rewards, and when the bill comes due for the winner, the consequences start a war. Close second is Balder. His mom extracts a prophecy from every object in the world never to harm him due to a prophecy about his death. She neglects mistletoe. All the other gods have fun launching all manner of deadly objects at Balder only for them to fall harmlessly at his feet. Loki tricks a blind god into shooting an arrow made of mistletoe at him. Pandemonium ensues. Interestingly, even though we have almost no understanding of Norse beliefs, we do have limited toponyms and personal names for certain gods. Evidence for our worship is everywhere. Tyr is only in Denmark, Othin is very rare, and Thor is sporadic. There's even less evidence for West Germanic peoples, though there's some. There are a number of places named after Woden, Wotan, Othin, Odin, in continental Europe and England, a number of English settlements named after Thunir, Thor, a few named for Tyr, and zero evidence of any West Germanic god named Balder, for Balder/BHLD-G/Balder. The only direct evidence of the name is the Merseburg incantations, which are Old High German and reference Baldir. There are a few Scandinavian toponyms with Balder, and some plant names throughout Germanic Europe. The story of how the raven stole the sun, from I believe that Lingat and Haida regions of Alaska. It's also been forever since I've heard this story, so bear with me please. Roughly the story went something like this: when the earth was first created, the sun had not shined in the sky yet, until once a shape-shifting raven saw a burst of light in the sky. He followed it to this one village, which in a nearby river he saw a young girl drinking water from a river. He noticed there were pine trees around and turned himself into one of the pines and slipped into the young girl's mouth. After some time spent in her body, he becomes a fetus and the young lady is pregnant. The young lady so happens to be the daughter of the chief, who held this bright, shining yellow ball in his possession and kept it safely locked up. As the child grew older, his grandfather played with him with the shining ball. Meanwhile, the raven within was plotting a way to steal the treasure. One day, while big enough, the young boy asks his grandfather if he could handle the ball. The old man allows his grandson to roll the ball around, play with it. Happy, the child is giggling and smiling. That was until the raven realizes his open opportunity to take the ball and leave. He starts shedding his human skin and begins to sprout feathers and starts to caw. Eventually, the raven takes the ball and goes skyward, releasing it. This ball is now what we call the Sunday. The story of the buffalo dance. This will be the rather short version. I'll do my best to stay as close to the original as possible. As the story goes, way back when, the indigenous people of the plains here in the U.S. would stampede herds of buffalo towards cliffs in the fall to have enough meat for the winter. One fall, the hunting party was having a particularly difficult time getting the buffalo to actually head straight toward the cliff. They kept turning away. One day the chief's daughter was out walking and saw all the buffalo grazing on the other side of the canyon. Devising a plan, she called over and said, "If only you would jump across, I would marry one of you." Thinking they would fall short, bringing enough meat for her people for the winter. Much to her surprise, the buffalo jumped over the canyon, landing safely on the other side. "Well, princess, looks like you are my wife now," said the leader of the buffalo. She had no choice but to follow through on her promise. Not too long after, the chief was curious as to where his daughter had gone when a magpie swooped down and told him she has run off with the buffalo. The chief was furious. He put on his walking moccasins and headed out to find her with the magpie flying along with him. As they journeyed across the plains, the magpie spotted the herd of buffalo up ahead and flew to warn the princess. When he got close, he noticed all the buffalo were asleep. He whispered to her, "Your father will be here any moment and he is not happy." "Oh no," she said, "they'll kill him. Tell him to stay back and I will try to slip away." But before she knew it, here came the chief over the hill, startling the buffalo from their sleep. They stood up and ran straight toward him, trampling him into nothing. After they were done, the ground where he had just stood was nothing but dust. The princess ran over and dropped to her knees in tears as the buffalo all circled around. The leader of the buffalo stepped forward and asked, "Why are you crying?" "You killed my father," she said. "Yes, but have your people not killed hundreds of us?" asked the buffalo leader. "Do you shed the same tears when our lives are taken?" The princess sat quietly, thinking on the buffalo leader's words. After a minute the buffalo leader said, "I tell you what, if you can revive your father, I will let you return home." The princess wiped her tears and looked to the magpie. "Peck around down on the ground and see if you can find a piece of my father." The magpie did just that, and after a while he found a small piece of the chief's finger, and handed it to the princess. She placed the piece of her father on the ground and laid a blanket down over top. She stepped back and began to sing a song of revivification, a song of life, dancing as she did so. Sure enough, the chief began to return to his form under the blanket. The magpie, a very magical bird, joined in the singing as well, and before too long, the chief sat up under the blanket. The princess ran over and embraced him. The buffalo stood in amazement. They could not believe what they saw. The buffalo leader approached the chief and with his head bowed asked of him, "When you hunt our family, our brothers, our sisters, we ask that you sing this same song to revive us once again." The chief agreed, and from that day forward, upon the death of every buffalo, the hunters would sing the song of the buffalo to revive their spirit once again, showing gratitude for the gift of life that the buffalo had given to feed their people. Such a beautiful story. Bunjil is a creator deity, culture hero and ancestral being, often depicted as a wedge-tailed eagle, or eagle-hawk, in the Australian Aboriginal mythology of some of the Aboriginal peoples of Victoria. According to one legend, after creating the mountains, rivers, flora, fauna, and laws for humans to live by, Bunjil gathered his wives and sons, then asked Crow, who had charge of the winds, to open his bags and let out some wind. Crow opened a bag in which he kept his whirlwinds, creating a cyclone which uprooted trees. Bunjil asked for a stronger wind. Crow complied, and Bunjil and his people were blown upwards into the sky. Bunjil himself became the star Altair, and his two wives, the black swans, became stars on either side. Dr. An Australian indigenous bird god ascended to heaven by getting another god to do the most powerful fart in all of creation. This one is from Indian mythology. Lord Vishnu killing the demon Hiranyakashipu. Vishnu appeared as Narasimha. Nara means man and Simha means lion. The demon could neither be killed by a man nor by an animal, neither at day nor at night, neither at home nor outside, neither on the ground nor in the sky, neither by a weapon nor by supernatural powers. Therefore, Lord Vishnu appeared as a half-man half-lion. He killed Hiranyakashipu at dusk at the threshold of his house by making him lie on his lap and executing him with his claws. Hiranyakashipu had believed that the boon granted by Brahma would make us immortal, but Lord Vishnu outsmarted him by appearing as Narasimha. The centennial lotus. In the darkest, dankest, dirtiest swamp grows a rare strain of lotus. In this miserable environment, the lotus grows and matures over a span of 100 years. Slowly, steadily, this flower grows. Once it finally reaches maturity and blooms, it's the most gorgeous and fragrant flower in all of existence. The finest diamond can't compare to its beauty. The finest perfume smells foul compared to it. Yet, in any other environment, this flower withers and dies. I have a tattoo of a lotus specifically for this myth, and because it resonated so deeply, I'm going to go with my favorite Egyptian story. Long ago, when the pyramids were still young, Egyptian kings played a game of great and terrible power. But these shadow games erupted into a war that threatened to destroy the entire world, until a brave and powerful pharaoh locked the magic away, imprisoning it within the mystical millennium items. Now, 5,000 years later, a boy named Yugi unlocks the mystical millennium puzzle. He is infused with ancient magical energies, for destiny has chosen him to defend the world from the return of the shadow games, just as the brave pharaoh did 5,000 years ago. Forgot where I read this one, but it's a Native American legend from Florida. A brash dude stumbles across a strange fruit, or some kind of edible plant. He's told not to eat it, but he does anyway. Bad idea, because he turns into a giant snake. So he snakes his way up and down Florida, leaving behind deep grooves in the earth. He eventually snakes his way into the ocean, and the grooves fill with water, and thus the St. John's River was formed. Tiresias and the snakes. Really, most of Metamorphoses. Tiresias is walking through the woods, sees two snakes mating, so he bonks them with his walking stick. In response, he is transformed into a woman. A few years later, he sees the same pair of snakes making snake whoopee, and he hits them again. Boom, back to being male. Later told Zeus that women get more from sex than men do.